My name's Felicity Gillard. I am the On Q Recruitment Team Leader for the Government Technical Team. My background, I have 25 years of recruitment experience, 10 years working in the recruiting area of state and federal government, where I've been an in-house recruiter. I have managed end-to-end recruitment projects. These particular projects have been working through a range of executive and non-executive positions. My background is skilled in recruiting a broad range of roles. Some of these have been technical and non-technical, government, executive, not-for-profit, and I've worked in most verticals. So you would possibly call me a generalist recruiter. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Julia Withy.
Thanks, Felicity. My name's Julia Withy, and I also work in the government team alongside Felicity as the Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant with On Q Recruitment. A bit about my background. I've been in the recruitment industry for about 20 years, recruiting across a range of industries, including healthcare, executive, accounting and finance, trades, and customer service and call centre. So it's a delight to be able to share with you some of the tips and tricks that I've learnt over the years that may help you with your career and your application and aiming to get a job or landing a job in the public sector.
Thanks, Julia. So the topics we're going to cover today will be how to make your application stand out. And we're going to talk about building your own personal brand, the recruitment process, assessments, attending the interview, reference checking, and provide you some other resources and useful links. You, Julia.
Thanks, Felicity. So your personal branding is very important when you are looking for a job. This slide shows some individuals who have an excellent personal brand and are known as top LinkedIn influencers. Your personal brand is important as employers have or will be looking at your online or social presence. So it's important to be aware of your online activities, in particular social websites that may be open for everyone to see. Some companies do actually look to see if you have an active online presence. They're looking to see if you are connected with certain people in the industry as well. So it's important to make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date when you are looking for a job. Also, you might find this useful. There is an open for opportunities feature on LinkedIn for you to use. And this helps you to be able to alert recruiters that you are open to hearing about job opportunities, and it provides them with a little bit of information on the type of roles that you'll be looking for, and if they should reach out to you to talk about opportunities that they have available. Recruiters and hiring managers almost always Google their candidates. So personal branding is certainly not just for CEOs. So your digital footprint is important, and it can be a powerful tool that can be used as a compelling first impression. So think about what makes your story unique. Taken an unusual path to get to where you are today? Has your career taken interesting twists or turns? Or has your life experience impacted your professional choices? Your CV will tell your story, and the story will be more compelling with a really professional personal brand. So today, again, just talking about the social presence. This can help to build trust. Potential employers that are looking at your profile, this shows your commitment to the work that you do and the skills that you have that impact the sense of virtual community. People can get to know you through your social presence, and it can really have an impact on your professional profile online. And this can all be built through your personal brand via LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So moving on to applying for a government job and how to make your application stand out. So over to you, Felicity, if you'd like to talk through this in a little more detail.
Thanks, Julia. So I guess the most important thing today is talking about applying for jobs for state government and for federal government. Federal government is the APS recruitment framework, APS values, code of conduct and merit selection. I'm going to talk about that today. APS stands for Australian Public Service, just so everyone knows. Sorry if we're speaking in acronyms. It's just obviously a lot faster for us to get through this information today on the slide. However, one of the things that I guess is really important when you make application to the APS or Australian Public Service, the framework is typically what you're going to be using as the premise for making your application. There's also going to be a code of conduct, which is outlined in documents relating to your application. And just so you also know, when you apply for roles in the state and federal government, all applications are based on a merit selection process. And that means they are collecting evidence to support information about your application and comparing that to other candidates throughout the process. When you actually go onto the APS websites, and we'll supply you the details a little bit later, application kit refers to the information that you'll download when you go into the APS website. It gives you information relating to exactly what you're going to apply for. It reviews information such as the grade or classification of the role, the status of employment type, which is referring to whether it's ongoing, temporary, casual, fixed term contract, or if you're going to be or if you're going to be making application for a talent pool. Salary range is also mentioned, which is pegged to the grade or classification of the role. Mandatory qualifications are normally outlined in the application kit, and you have the contact officer's name and or telephone number and email as well listed. There's also a request normally in that application kit for the person to respond to a statement of claim, which we'll talk about a little bit later in more detail. Other parts of your application include your eligibility criteria. It is a requirement that you're an Australian citizen when you're applying for jobs within APS and some state government roles as well. Noting that when you make your application, you may not necessarily have full citizenship. It might be underway. That's perfectly fine. You can make note of that in your application. Also, other criteria will be to be able to obtain a federal police criminal history check. Some particular roles have more security checks than a federal police check, just depending on the clearance level you need for each role. Medical declaration, which is normally standard in many job applications. It is uncommon, but sometimes happens where you might have to do a medical. It depends on the duties of the job, but that's all going to be outlined in your application kit. Evidence of qualifications. Again, on many instances, your qualifications may be checked and verified depending on the roles that you're applying for. Just make note that if you've started off doing a course and you've actually not completed it, make note of that. So when they're checking qualifications, they know what to look for. Reference checks are also part of the eligibility criteria for you to have 2 current references. This is a slide just showing you the details of some websites that you can look at that will highlight APS and state government jobs. And also don't forget to search on the On Q website. We often have permanent and contracting roles that are located there, and there are some website links for you to look at as well. Okay, your resume. This is my next most important topic to talk through. Your critical application process will require you to have a resume that is up to date. We're just showing you here on this slide some, I guess, refreshed versions of how your resume can look. It's not mandatory that you have a photo on your resume. In fact, sometimes it's probably not the preference, but we have seen a lot of websites now that do show visuals, and if you feel it's appropriate, pop your photo on just to give the reader a bit more insight as to who you are. But the most important thing with your resume is to keep it up to date and keep it refreshed. So here are some really good options of different websites that you can go to look at how to create your new look resume. One of the most important things here, Julia and I would like to, I guess, say to you all is tailoring a resume to meet the needs of the job you're applying for is absolutely critical. It's really your sales pitch. When your resume is a true reflection of all the work you've done, your achievements, qualifications, it gives the reader a really good understanding about who you are and what your capabilities are. And it's advised that when you make applications for various jobs that you do tailor your resume to meet the needs of each job. This means that you might actually have 2 or 3 resumes sitting in your toolkit ready to go. And have these ready to align with your skills. We've all got different sets of skills and capabilities, and there are certain jobs that will require highlighting of more of one set of skills and capabilities than others, and that's what a tailored resume will actually do. Importantly, I would suggest you put your qualifications up front so people at a glance can find out about you, and use some keywords in that application or your resume that draws the reader's attention to the job advertisement that you're applying for. Some do's and don'ts. Do have several resumes, as I've mentioned. This applies for you, this enables you to apply for jobs very quickly because you can go to that resume extremely quickly and make your application and be one of the first people in, which is really important in this market because it's so competitive. Keep your resumes up to date and include some of your achievements as you progress through your career, because sometimes we forget that information. Quantify your achievements. So if you can actually add numbers or percentages against what you actually did, that's great. The reader understands a lot more about how it actually measured up. However, on another note, keep it brief, use bullet points, don't regurgitate your job description into a resume. That is not what the reader wants to see, because otherwise they'll be asking you to supply your job description when you're making application, and that's not the intent of a resume. Have a format that's clear, and we would prefer that you submit resumes in Word documents. Recruiters find it increasingly difficult to submit your resume through a system if we have to reformat a PDF formation. So just think about that when you are creating your resume. Word is preference. On the don'ts, don't use too much text, have some white space. Preferably think about whether it's appropriate to include your photo. It just depends. It might be the most appropriate thing to add your current photo, or you can leave it out. Going back to Julia's point earlier in the slides, we know that many of our recruiters actually go and Google you and will see your photo on LinkedIn anyway, so it's not mandated that you have a photo there on your resume. Also be mindful of any dates or information you include in relating to your education and qualifications, and most definitely don't put your date of birth on your application. That's something that is not required any longer.
Great. Thank you, Felicity. So moving on to your actual application and some of the things that you can look at before you apply. This is really important to put in a bit of time to do your research. So making sure that you've looked at, researched the organisation or the government agency that you're applying to, and really understand what they do, and if you feel that there's an alignment there in terms of what you're interested in. When you're doing your research, making sure that you're making any, write down any questions or things that you'd like to ask or find out. We also recommend that you can pick up the phone and call the person on the advertisement. This may help to provide more insight into the role, and it's an exercise for you to determine if it's the job you really want. This can actually work really well, and it can actually make you stand out in amongst the other applicants. That shows that you've made the initiative to pick up the phone and talk to them and find out a bit more about it. Be prepared before you make the call though. Make sure that you've looked into the department, you know who they are, you know what you're going to say, and note down any questions and things that you'd like to learn. Plan your pitch and your questions. So again, once you've got all of your information and your research, then you know the things that you want to say, the things you want to highlight in your interview. And also, this is just a really great way to do your preparation, and it's, will help you in your interview if you've made the effort to find out a little bit more information. So your actual application will include your application letter or a statement of claim and a cover letter. So what is a statement of claim? So a statement of claim or selection criteria can be a 1 to 2 page letter that's outlining your skills and experience that you bring to the role that relate to the job requirements. So this is really your opportunity to communicate why you should be considered for the role. So sometimes the way that they will request that you submit a statement of claim is, say, the application might say, please submit a statement of claim and tell us your skills, knowledge and experience or qualifications that make you the best candidate for this opportunity. Or it could say something like, please prepare a 1-page statement in relation to the advertised role, outlining skills, knowledge and experience that's relevant to the role, why you're interested in the role and what you can offer, and provide any specific examples or achievements that demonstrate your ability to perform the role. So moving on to the next slide, over to you, Felicity.
Thanks, Julia. So now, once you've gone through your application, I guess one of the most important things is to determine which job classification is going to be your best fit. One of the ways you can do this is by reviewing the APS classifications on the website, which will take you to the work level standards that is actually noted on this slide. So the Australian Public Service have classifications from APS levels 1 to 6, executive levels 1 and 2, senior executive service band 1, 2 and 3. Salaries are going to vary across the grades and the executive bands, noting that every single grade or level of job actually has a series of steps. So when you start working within the federal government, your first role might be an APS level 1, and you go in at 1.1 and progress through to 1.4. This is true for many of the other classifications as well, 6.1, 6.2, up to 4, etc. If you're a new entrant to the federal government, it's typical that you would enter into a salary that is at the entry point, which would be, if you're APS 6, APS 6.1. So you really do need to actually look at those salary bands when you're making your application to make sure it's comparable to what you're either on now or what you think you would like to earn. If you want to earn more than what 6.1 represents, typically that will require a little bit of negotiation at a higher level and sometimes may not actually happen. So just be prepared that this is really true of what happens when you're entering into a federal government job. But I would encourage you to have a look at that work level standards website, because it does give you a lot more clear information, a lot more than I can share with just this one slide. Again, reviewing the APS recruitment guide is another way forward. So we recommend that you Google and look at the apsjobs.gov.au website. This is a great website where most of the jobs or all of the jobs for federal government are advertised. They're also advertised on Seek and other platforms, as we've mentioned earlier. But this one is actually the key gazetted job site. So recommend all of you sign up for job alerts, which means you start your own profile. You enter in the location of where you'd like to work, the types of job titles that you're interested in, and the grade or level that you would like to be receiving any notifications about. And you can check this website regularly, or you can just wait for these particular notices to come into your inbox. But I recommend that proactive approach is probably the best way to be reviewing the website on a regular basis. Likewise, if you want to have a look at some of the previous downloaded gazettes, you can go into this website and see other jobs that might have been launched around Australia. So it's a really good website to look at. Some jobs are only open to existing APS employees, and they may not necessarily be available for you to apply at this point, because it's not looking to attract external candidates through the application portal. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Felicity. So contract roles are a great way to get your foot in the door, if you like, or open the door to a career in the public sector. You know, contracting can provide a wide range of career opportunities, and does allow the flexibility and inclusivity that you're looking for. And sometimes with contracting roles, you know, you may not need any public service experience or limited public service experience to be successful in the positions. And so once you've had that experience, it becomes a lot easier for you to move into other roles within the public service. So you can get assistance and guidance from your recruitment consultants at On Q, and making sure that you build a relationship with your recruitment consultant so that you are considered when contracting roles come in, and you'll be top of mind to your consultant when they're looking for people to, you know, to put forward for these positions. So really keep contracting in mind if you are looking to get into the public service. And over to you, Felicity, to the next slide.
Thanks, Julia. So I guess what we want to talk about here in this slide is state government versus federal government applications. They're a little bit different, and they're different in the notion of what is actually assessed. So here we have the website for you all to look up. I work for New South Wales Government.au. This is the website that hosts most of the government jobs for New South Wales. You'll also be able to see these jobs posted, many of them on LinkedIn, Seek and Glassdoor. We recommend, again, you set up an alert. So you start a profile, building information about your name, address, skills, capability, and it's there ready to go. And then you also put into this particular portal information relating to jobs that you're interested to find out about. So this will send you some links on a regular basis, matching your requirements to job vacancies. It's a very helpful way to find out about work that is available in the New South Wales State Government. Some things to note though, advertisements don't last for a long time. State government advertises roles for between 1 to 2 weeks only. Sometimes they might be longer, they may extend it for some reason, but that means your ad is only live for that period of time. So during the window that you see this job ad, most importantly, you need to download and save the job advertisement, the application kit, information about the job like the number, the job number, the contact details, the work type and remuneration package, just so you know exactly what you are expected to respond to. There may also be in this particular pack some other links to other websites or other documents. I advise that you download that as well, because once the job ad is closed, you cannot go back and get that information. Additionally, extensions. That's another thing I want to just bring to your attention. When the job advertisement has closed, typically you cannot ask for a late submission. You can give it a go if you have some extenuating circumstances, which means you can go back to the contact and request if they would consider having your application reviewed a little bit later. But a little bit later means 1 or 2 days, not 1 or 2 weeks, unfortunately, because by that stage, the panel is normally shortlisting candidates. Okay, federal government applications. APS jobs are advertised on a different website, the one we've actually spoken about earlier. And this is where you can also have your profile that you can set up. The job window advertising is typically a little bit longer, sometimes 2 to 4 weeks. And during that period, again, same thing applies. Make sure you actually download all the application pack, get all the information you need regarding your job description and your statement of claim requirements and contact details, of course. Importantly, you need to also make note of which states the job is advertised, because APS typically can advertise jobs around Australia, so all states and in all territories. So just make a note of that when you're downloading the job pack. And it's important to keep the name of the contact as well. So if you need to go back and have a chat to them for any reason, as in establishing connection, so you can find out this is a job for you, you'll find it on this particular download. Okay, next one gives you a bit more information about the capability comparison. So we've just put this slide in here for state government applications. It's available, more information is available on the Public Sector Capability Framework website. But for roles in New South Wales State Government, there are quite a substantial number of accountabilities, challenges and relationships that are going to be assessed, and they're going to be assessed across quite a wide range of different focus capabilities for every role at different levels. And this is just a quick reader reference so you can understand what potentially might be the assessment process that you would go through when applying for state government. Over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Felicity. So now we're going to talk a little bit more detail about the recruitment process. So for a lot of people, this may be quite straightforward, but just to give you an overview of the different steps that are involved. So once the applications are closed, there will be a period of time where there will be some screening and pre-screening. So the panels or the hiring managers will be screening the resumes, and they might be doing some pre-screening phone calls to decide who they would like to invite in for an interview. And then the interviews will be scheduled. There could be just one interview, or there may be 2 interviews, depending on the role. Following that, there's generally a variety of different assessments that may take place. They could be some tests, or it could be they might ask you to prepare a case study, or they might give you a scenario to prepare and present in one of the interviews. Following that, references and background checks will be conducted. So this could be obviously contacting your references, but the background checks could be to do with criminal history checks, etc. Following that, usually the hiring managers will be in a position to make a decision on who they would like to appoint. And following that, they will make a job offer and prepare and present a contract to you for signing. So really that's a bit of a straightforward overview of the recruitment process. So just going to move on to interviews now. Over to you, Felicity.
Okay, this is my favourite subject, types of interviews. There are so many different types of interviews now, and with technology as it is, and with COVID, that's been, I guess, part of our lives for so many years now. There's been a bit of a move away from face-to-face interviews, and so we have a lot more platforms that have become very important. So one that's quite often used is video interviewing. This is actually a great way to showcase your skills. So just say you put your application in, the actual panel has said that, oh, this person looks really interesting, we'd like to find out more about them. And there's a lot of people that they're reviewing at the same time. So quite often they'll send you a video link and you'll be asked to respond to a set of questions. These questions are typically timed and you have to self-manage your response to the questions. One thing that's great about video interviews, you have an option to re-record your answers. So if you don't like your initial response, you can dump it and start again. But don't be afraid of video interviews. They are a great way to showcase your capability. Then the next form of interview that we see quite a lot are bulk assessment campaigns. That means if there's lots of people that have applied for jobs with lots of vacancies, there could be this call where we ask a lot of people to come in at one time. And so you will meet your, I guess, other people looking for jobs all together in one room. They will talk about the job in more detail. They will give you more information about the actual steps of what to expect in the assessment campaign. You might actually break away into smaller groups with other members that are applying for the same job and be asked a series of questions. They could be really quick questions, a bit like speed dating. And then the panel will come back together and say thank you for your time and move on to making some decisions later on. These are quite often used for roles such as customer service position and alike. Some entry roles go through bulk assessment campaigns. Although, having said that, I have seen a similar kind of process happen for some executive roles, but with a very different twist. Panel interviews. These interviews are typically over Teams or Zoom, where you'll be sent a link and you'll have a chair that will be the head of the actual panel. Normally the chair is a decision maker. You'll have two other members most likely on the panel, and that may be, for example, a person at the same grade or higher who has an interest and understands the role, and an independent person sitting on that panel. These interviews are also timed and you'll have a period of time to respond to a set of questions. Finally, multiple mini interviews. This is again similar to bulk assessment campaigns where there are multiple roles and the actual panel has not got a lot of time. So in lieu of doing one-on-one interviews, they bring a whole lot of people in at the same time to run through the same questions, and you attend a series of panels where you're asked different questions and you move from one panel to another through a room or through rooms. They're quite fun, and at the end of the day it just means that the assessment process is much faster and it is sped up as opposed to 1 hour slots for interviews. Getting through those interviews, well, this is really important. I know it's nerve-wracking and we all acknowledge that we have a level of nerves, but to actually alleviate your nerves, one of the things I suggest, and it doesn't really matter at what level you are in your career, a brag book is something I suggest you create. Now you might ask, what is that? But it's a book where you write down all the things that have happened to you in your career that you can remember that have been achievements or examples of where someone might have written you a congratulatory email or letter saying thank you so much for all the work you've done, you've been amazing, or your achievements have been exemplary, and we're so excited about all the work you've done. All these things are examples of really what you'd like to brag about at a later date. And you can bring forward your achievements in relation to your interviews, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So keep that brag book. It's a really good thing to have. Examples and achievements go into the brag book, I should say. When you are going through your interview, make sure that you look at the role description again, reread it, and compare and contrast your skills and your capability that matches the role description. That's really important to remember. You will be asked questions in your interview that are really trying to draw out your capabilities. And the best way to respond is in the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. We always want to know what the result is. So please don't forget that last part of the puzzle. It's important. Preparing your questions for the interviewer. So this is something I want to just talk about here. What we're referring to is getting your ideas on what sort of questions you think you might be asked. So you can write down a series of questions in your mind. You may say, I believe I'm going to be asked questions about XYZ capability, and so prepare something similar along those lines. Then you can actually look at also writing down a response and making sure you have the right information to respond back in the STAR method. I'd also suggest recording your answers. It's a great way to practice because you can listen to yourself. You can listen to your tone, your pitch, your voice, your tempo. What tends to happen a lot with interviews, we do speak quite quickly, and speaking quickly doesn't necessarily allow the person or the panel to understand the fullness of your responses. So try and keep this in mind when you're actually preparing for interviews. Over to you, Julia.
Great, thanks Felicity. So just to go into that in a little bit more detail, we've broken down the STAR method so that you can see how to answer these questions. So basically it's an acronym for situation, task, action and result. So when you're answering your questions and you're looking at the situation, really be able to explain the situation and explain where you were working at the time and paint the scene for the hiring manager so that they can really understand the situation that you're in and the pressures that you are under. And then talk about the tasks that were involved. Because of this situation, I had to do A, B, C, D, and E. So describe what you actually required to do and why this was required. And for A, the actions that you undertook and why you chose that action. Describe the steps that you took to execute that action. And did you have influence on any group that was involved in the process? And what was the response to your action? What was the results or the outcome? So coming to the results, really explain what was the outcome, what happened, who were the stakeholders, and how did they respond? So it really gives a full overview of that particular situation so that people can really understand your experience that you're trying to share with them. Also, to note, something that people often do as a habit when they are in interviews is to talk about their experience and say, oh, we did this, or we were involved in this, and we put together this. So using we is probably not ideal in an interview situation. It's better if you can start to kind of practice using the word I. So I did this, and then I went on to do this, and I looked into doing some research in this area. So make it a practice and start to use the word I instead of we. It can be a big issue if you're not actually sharing with the interviewer what you actually did. And so they're clear on what you actually did rather than what perhaps the team did. So for the more complex the role, the greater the complexities of your response will be and the more detail that you'll need to give to the panel. So don't rush through this. Take your time to actually prepare some some experiences that you can share or highlights that you can practice talking about using the STAR methodology and making sure that you have a really good close when you're talking about the result. So it leaves a really great impression. So during the interview, Here's some tips that we'd like to share as well. So keep the panel engaged during the interview. It's really important. If you can, write down their names and use the names through the interview. When you're using people's names, they become a lot more engaged in what you're saying. So that's a really handy tool to use. Also, it's okay to ask the interviewer to please repeat the question. Sometimes in a panel interview, the questions can be, perhaps 2 or 3 questions in one. So feel free to take a deep breath and say, please, can you repeat the question? And take a minute to think about it and actually prepare how you'd like to respond. And what does it mean if I'm probed or the panel asks me more probing questions? This generally means that they're looking for more information, of course, so they'd like you to provide more detail. They're looking for more information in your answer. So really try to elaborate a lot more and provide the panel with some more information or other aspects to the situation that you may not have covered. Being prepared, again, is really important. To review the job details again, obviously prior to the interview, and prepare some relevant career experiences that you can talk about. And think about the questions that you might like to ask at the interview. Generally, you'll always have an opportunity to ask some questions. So it's great to prepare something so that you're not kind of on the spot thinking, going, or if you've got some questions prepared, it shows the panel that you've had time to think about it and there's things that you really want to know about the role. And so, for example, one of the questions you might like to ask is, when will I hear an update on the role? And also, what's also really important during the interview or the wrap up of the interview is to really make good use of your closing comments, because this is how the panel will kind of remember your interview. So use this as your pitch as to why you should be hired. So moving on to talk a little bit more about assessments. Over to you, Felicity.
Thanks, Julia. Some good points there you've made. Moving into the assessment field, this is something that we all get sometimes a little bit confused about, and I would say we probably find there is a little bit of anxiety about some of the assessments, but I want to allay your fears. State government assessments actually are quite rigorous, and I'll couch this in the form that there are a lot of capabilities that state government roles are assessing, and that's the reason for the rigour. So in state government, there are 3 forms of assessment. Typically, they have to assess the capabilities by 3 different methods. And that means once they receive your application and they believe your application has merit from reading your cover letter and potentially some questions that you've responded to and your resume, they'll then send you a link normally, which is an online assessment. This is not something you need to get worried about. It's not a pass or fail. It's basically an assessment to find out more about your skills, your capabilities, and also areas for future development. So please don't worry about online assessments. Then you may, after that particular assessment, receive an invitation to attend an interview, or it could be even a video interview, so one of the 2. On that basis, you would either attend the video interview by responding to the questions, keeping in mind you're going to be timed, or you may be asked to come into a bulk recruitment activity or a one-on-one panel interview, which will most likely be the case. That panel interview will ask you questions, again, based on the focus capabilities of that job. And during the course of that interview, they may have already sent you a work sample or case study that you need to respond to. And that will be something that you may respond to in the first 10 minutes of your interview, which is by creating a presentation and sharing your screen. In that way, you've had 3 forms of assessment: online assessment, a case study or work sample, and an interview. Therefore, you would have gone through the rigours of the state government assessment process. What they're trying to do is determine your capabilities against other candidates to see where you kind of sit in terms of your merit for the role. So it is a merit-based selection process, as we mentioned earlier. Federal government is also a merit-based selection process. And the way that this is quite different is there most likely 2 forms of assessment as opposed to 3. with federal government. The assessment process will be you send in your application and you submit your statement of claim, talking about your suitability for the role, that's outlining your skills and capabilities against the core requirements of that position. Then you may be asked to come in for an interview, and that will mean you will be interviewed by a panel, and the panel interview will ask you a series of more questions relating to the key role requirements. And sometimes in federal government there is a psychometric. It's not as common as in state government though. Just gives you an idea of the differences. But again, the most important aspect of the recruiting methodology with federal government and state government is on a merit-based process. Do you compare and contrast your application with that of others that have been brought forward for interview? Okay, next slide.
So now we're going to talk about references. So reference check, again, it's a very important part of the recruitment process. Some things to note here is make sure that you inform your referees prior to submitting their details. So it's important to give them the heads up that you are looking for work and ask their permission to use their details, or if they would be happy to provide you with a reference. This gives you the opportunity to explain to them your current situation, your role, and why you're looking to move, or why you're looking for another job opportunity. Also important is to make sure that your referees are recent line managers. Ideally, they need to be within the last 5 to 6 years. And this is so that they are relevant and that they can talk about your most recent experience. Also, make sure that when you're speaking to your referees, it's important to make sure that you have their current contact details, so that if they are contacted to provide a reference for you, then the panel can get in touch with them easily. So this is all really important information to make sure that you've got all lined up before you submit a reference with your application. So moving on now to some more tips and resources. Over to you, Felicity.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, so we're coming to the close of our presentation. So I'd like to recap on some of the tips for success of how to land that government job. So here are some of the tips. Firstly, create your personal brand. Identify your unique selling points. That's really important. And don't forget to start your brag book so you can put in there all the great things that you've done in your career history. We tend to forget some of the great things we've done, and we can mostly sometimes only remember the bad. So brag book's a really important thing to use. I'd also recommend that in that brag book, you may also want to think about putting in some things like your learnings, what you learnt from certain situations or outcomes or projects you worked on. Keep your resume up to date. Cannot impress how important that is. Resume is your #1 calling card for success, and if it's up to date, you can quickly make application for several jobs that suit your skills and background. Research the job, research the department. This is really simple to do. All you need to do is go onto the website of the job and the department that you're applying for. It normally will give you a really good breakdown about the organisation, and I would strongly advise that another way to learn about the department you're applying for is to read the annual report. It gives you a great insight to so many different aspects of that business. Call the contact that's listed on the job advertisement. Make yourself known, create a link, connect with them. It's good for them to know that there are people out there that are interested in their jobs, and very often as an internal recruiter, I would hear comments like, I've had a lot of people ring me about this job. I'm very excited about my applications I'm going to receive because of the people I've spoken to. So make note, the contacts really like it when you call them. Keep track of your applications. Julia and I have had countless experiences throughout our career where we've called candidates to invite them in for application for jobs that they've applied for. And when we've called them, it's almost like they have forgotten what jobs that they have made their applications for. So if you keep a little spreadsheet, it's great because it looks that you're interested and you still want to progress with that interview. So that's another little tip for you all to remember. I suggest find an interview buddy. This goes back to preparation. When you're preparing for your job interviews, please go down the road of finding somebody that you know you can trust and who will work with you, that you feel comfortable to prepare your questions you think you might be asked, and also have some question responses ready, so the buddy can ask you the questions, you can respond, they can time you and tell you whether you're on track or whether you're running over time. Because remember, in government recruitment, you only have a limited window to respond to questions, which is normally about 5 to 8 minutes. So your buddy can really help you there. Remember the STAR technique when responding to interview questions, and don't forget the result. When we're listening to many applicants respond to questions that are asked in panels, we quite often are hanging to the very end, and it's like not getting to an end of a movie, or the end of a movie isn't that great. So we'd like to hear the result. Please don't forget that. It's really critical. Keep your response to the interview's questions succinct. That's why I said suggest you have a buddy. They can help keep you on track, or you can time yourself by using your phone. Try and stay calm and focused. I know this is a big one because when you go into interviews, it's natural to be nervous. And actually, sometimes it's good to have a bit of nerves because it means you're really focused on trying to do your best and get that job. So you're on the starting line. Just try not to go forth and show your nerves to the panel, although they always know when candidates are nervous. Some of the clues are speaking too quickly, and that's one of the things we do recommend to try and manage your nerves by keeping your voice in check. Build rapport with the panel, refer to them by name, say, thank you, Julia, that was a great question, here's my response. That's always a really good way to make sure the panel knows that you are interested in responding and you're interested in them. Prepare a compelling closing statement. This is really important. It's like your unique selling proposition. It's your elevator pitch. It's things about you that's unique to you and why you would be such a good fit for that job. You've gone through the motions of applying. You've gone through the motions of the assessments. It's really important you can close the loop on this whole process. Don't forget to thank the panel. Panel spent some time out of their busy schedule talking to you, and likewise you talking to them. So politeness is always a great way to close an interview by thanking them for their time. I guess these are my tips for success, and I know that they work. Well, that comes to a close for today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. Obviously, if there's any questions, you can send them to onqrecruitment.com.au or reach out by calling us. And good luck with your application. Bye for now.
Thank you.